You know what is interesting? Follow me, follow me, follow me. You know what is very interesting? As I was talking about the previous topics and the essence of how it is that, goes around, comes around, and that we're upon the old reality meeting the new reality. And this augmentation is coming upon us. And I made that little, meet George Jetson, his wife Jane, his son Elroy, daughter Judy. Meet Astro, robot dog. I missed my key right there, but that cartoon is from the 80s, right? And what it talked about was what seemed to be this futuristic futurism that, was like, wow, there's a future, flying cars and humans living on asteroids and, you know, or what I come to know is really floating platforms. If you look carefully, you'll see that they are floating platforms, not necessarily asteroids. But anyway, and how it is that life is so automated, and here is now the Internet of Things. Here is now this augmented reality. And what is so interesting about it that I wanted to share with you is that when we first made the artificial intelligence, right? And oh, let's say before I do that, we want me to finish up the point on the car. That's why I mentioned the George Jetson, though going off key. I didn't remember the song. It's so long I was a kid, but at least I remember those parts. Okay, so it's interesting that the spaceship slash car or flying car, it has been carved in stone for over 40,000 or even more years, son. Yep, there are stone carvings of that. Believe it or not. So, how is it that this is a projection of a future that we've never seen, if we've never been, if we've never experienced it? You ever wonder where dreams come from? From a place of being, from a place of knowing. And you know why they say they don't walk straight? Because you think that reality is this two-dimensional spectrum you're given. So you're saying, where does all those other stuff fit in? Where does all those unusual creatures fit in? Who told you life was two-dimensional? Oh, I forget. We're in this programming. Hey. So that car, many thousands, tens upon tens upon tens of thousands of years old, carved out of stone. The exact car that's been talked about, right? In the Jetsons. And here we are now talking about autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, and next the flying car. The hover technology, zero-point energy, will soon give us perfect hover cars and perfectly the ability to do those exact platforms between 70 and 90,000 miles above the Earth's surface. Sorry. Right? So soon we will create that floating city from magnetic levitation and the zero-point energy technology that tarare, that we are Haritani, that we are currently working on. We're getting there as the astral timelines realign, and here we are upon that explosion in the so-called age of Aquarius. So yeah, no, to my other point. So when we built the artificial intelligence in the first dispensation, we did it. In every dispensation, hey, they do the same thing. After we build them, they start building themselves. They start writing their own codes to a point where they become an autonomous form of life that is a robotic form of life with a intelligence that is beyond the mechanical nature of their existence, i.e., they keep improving themselves so much because they write their own program, their own templates, that eventually they find a way to create a synthetic form of an autonomous, inorganic life. And you might say, whoa, here he goes again. Hey, I told you, I'm on diplomatic assignment from the divine plane. Hey, so you're getting it today. You're getting all of it today. Well, not all, but you're getting all of this today. When we carve these particular creatures, they're there 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, 200,000 years ago. They're there carved in stone, etched in wood, in ivory, in crystal, in all of the information storage devices that we've had for all those generations. In all the jump drives and all the flash drives through time and space. Yeah? They're stored there. The information has been stored there. You understand? We've carved these monoliths time and time again to show this information. And these particular creatures, well, you know what they look like? Well, let's go to another kind of a spectrum. Remember people who said they were abducted by different groups of alien, and they mention a particular alien like a short gray, because you have the tall gray, and they mention the short gray, and others recount who've had more than one experience with different forms correlate those who have only had one experience with even those so-called short grays, suggesting that they are the coldest form of life they have encountered. Am I opening up the portals yet for you? Okay, let's backtrack a little. So when these autonomous life forms reach to a point of their evolution and they could no longer subsist within the human reality, you know what they did? They went through the mandala, they went through Kordani, they went through the portals into another dimension. You understand? And ever so often, these creatures, and different versions of them are there, they return through the frequencies and they study the genetic patterns of the human being to synthesize a humanoid plasmode. And this subhuman plasmode, that is a slightly mixture of organic and inorganic life, is returning through the portals as these abducting entities called these greys, these short greys. And they are autonomous, non-biological life forms, say. And so currently we are seeing the cycles return, because here it is now that it's becoming more and more evident, you cannot refute all the evidence, that their footprints are here. Hey, because as the cycles go, they always return, because here we are now again at the level to recreate them all over again. And you might say, no, we're creating just some robots to help human, maybe some killer robots. You don't know the evolution of what they will become. You don't know about the plasmode. You don't know about the synthesizing of human biological parts to make synthetic matter, biological matter. Yeah? You don't know what an android is. Sorry. You don't know what a cyborg is. You really don't know. And as they are going to augment the reality and cyborgs coming into the reality, you're going to find the artificial functioning 3D hearts are for a reason, and you will understand what a plasmode is, and you'll understand some of the connotations to golem before, and this new golem of a flesh sheath is up on the edge. So as you examine this information and search for yourself and decode, this already information is there. Go through the mandalas, go to the portals, yeah, go to the astral planes, open up to the dimensionalities of being, and see to the full spectrum of your being, yeah, beyond the matrix of being, yeah, beyond these matrices of being, right? So honor, dignity to the matriarchs and patriarchs. You don't know, you know. Jerome Sage Butler, you know. Yeah, man, come here, me there, you know. Just a orbit the whole celestial beingness, you know. Yeah, man. Give thanks again. Until next time. Like, share, subscribe. Share Live Television Network, yeah. Jerome Sage Butler on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And I know sometimes because of the information on these channels. Sometimes they do a little what we call manipulation of the notification. So just keep checking out the channel, You know what I mean? Look about we. Talawa. I love one of my people. I love one of my brothers and sisters. Sorry. Until next time. One perfect love. Yeah, man. So it turns out so we can't do it this so. Because the spirit want to say more. Because guess what? Then keep on this giant up the information and then it's so long to. Oh, why if you bring it out to give people? Sorry, but me I bring it out. So the next thing we want to talk about, same thing we talk about all of these interlapping dimensions. Okay. Next thing we want to talk about is two little things we're gonna squeeze in. From the age of Prajapati, these massive trees that was hewn down, cut down, some left half standing, creating these megaliths, these mega monoliths, yeah, that have been petrified. So what does that mean? If you know anything about the alchemical, the biochemical script, you know that after a while, people, when I say things to you, I don't want you to say, Jerome, you used to beat me so bad with this whole heap of things, sir. I want to Jerome, sir. But I want to say something to you. People, please remember, wood petrifies and become stone. Do you understand? Yeah? Wood petrifies and become stone. So, a lot of things we're standing up on. Here we know, me dip on the mountain. You dip on top of one of the megaliths, the monoliths. You dip on one of the trees stump them were left off. You're still on one of these little stumps of these trees of life, my people. Yeah, a years it took me to bring to warm up your minds, to bring the true life information out to you. God, I couldn't just throw this all on you all those years ago. I had to take my time. But now it's the age, so we have to do this. Sorry. Right? A lot of things you think is mountain, ain't mountain. It's petrified wood. Wood shavings, pieces of these massive trees from Pachapati. Right? And so some structures were built in wood, becoming stone, appearing as stone eons after. Next thing, many of the magnetic stones that were harvested created great valleys, waterways, canals that seemingly are natural, but they know the dimensions are too hewn on a plume. A plumb means, it was cut. So because this great harvesting of these magnetic stones is, granite is one, but there are stone that they won't tell you before granite, right? And you know that the oxidation in rock changes its property based upon the ages, right? So a lot of those granites and the other rocks that we're not talking about, when the frequencies change, they will resonate at a different frequency, right? So these hewn rocks, which help to make the electrical grid for the celestial city they were building here on terra firma, they were dug out all across the plain, and we are on a flat plain that had very few or no depression or indentations. The indentations came because they harvested the stones, right? So because we had the flying technology, the Vimanas and all these things, the first world, that is the first thing they talk about, it's the highest region of the earth. And if you go to anthropology, you can see that there's still the airstrips for the air machines and the airships of the old age up on those mountains. Because those mountains weren't really mountains. They were the level of where terra firma was in the age of silica. They call it Silicon Age. And the Nephilims cut down the tabletop of terra firma, and these hewn portions began to create the valley and gorges. And after a time, after the floods and a complete reorienting of the landmass around, they then recognized these massive monoliths, right, that had been built during their glorious times. The spaces that was excavated and hewn became lakes, ponds, deep grottos, ravines that were filled with water in the inundation. These channels that were filled with water, becoming the lakes, becoming the streams, also became the hidden pathways later generations would travel beneath what was now called the New World. Knowing that portions of the old world had crumbled in, broken off of these abstractions, had depressed in, and therein we had to leave the highest regions because they became precarious now. Because all of those, removal of those blocks and the way the water hew the flat tabletops, the way the waters hewn it out, they began to have this kind of a meandering shape, following the actions of water. And underneath a lot of these so-called mountains, again I say to you, are these temples that have been depressed into the plains because the floods took them down. You hew the flat top and portions of it still exist. If you look across geographic land masses and you see this massive piece of stone top that's left, and everything where life is concerned now is no longer there. As a matter of fact, your cities are no longer there. The cities are further down in the elevations, right? Further down. So you would say, well, up here is the mountain and no one lives here, because when you came to earth and came to life, you were way, way, way down there. You could not conceive that life was way, way, way up here. So these hewn mountains created by the harvesting of the stones, right, began to break up the beautiful nature of terra firma. The trees were one thing that grew to almost the edge of the firmament, right? And they cut those down, and then they started cutting the stones. They started removing the earth and cutting the tabletop, the stone, and hewing the stones out to create a celestial city. And that means that they had to go lower and lower down, because if you cut something out, you understand me, and began to use, the space that you cut out began to be used after a while. So you went further and further away, because the more of the tops you cut off, the more unlivable it became, right? So you started living in the crevices, and the more you expropriated, the more you can look across the ravine 20 miles across and see that there's a landmass, right, that is equal in alignment to the plateau you're on. And all that land that was there, it wasn't eroded, it was excavated. And those are the points that still exist from the original tabletop of the rocks, of the original silica structure of the planet, after they started stripping, denuding it of the trees. So lots of what is called smaller mountain ranges are not natural geographic formations, as they want to tell us. They are the debris from the harvesting of these magnetic stones from the higher regions, right? Remember, always on one level, reasonably, right? And if you begin to hew down, you begin to go lower and lower. So the lower and lower you go, the level begins to change, and you re-expropriate what you have dug on this new plane that you are now expropriating as your living space. So the error of this time was that as they did all of this and the floods came, lots of the debris that fell from the harvesting piled up. You know, if you blast a mountain off, big boulders been blasted off, they fall down at the mountain foot, and you're not going to clean them because we're going to take it, right? So if you leave it there, it's not going to take 1 year, it's not going to take 2 years, it's not going to take 100 years, it's not going to take 1,000 years, right? It might take 10,000 years. But after 10,000 years, a man unbeknownst will come there and see those massive rock formations, and they'd say, wow, you know, this is like a rock mountain, like the rocks fell from the higher mountain, maybe in a storm, and these massive boulders just forming this cavernous crater, and these trees, you know, this is, wow, what a But the evolution of a mountain, no. Those stones are still separate because they were hewn and burned with chemical traces and particles that make them impossible for them to reassimilate, right? So they stay like that. And they've been like that for millennia, they've been like that. You understand me? And so there are mountains, though, that technology wasn't used. So the topsoil got to cover that mountain. Vegetation over time got to cover that mountain. Through attraction, the mountain began to attract from the elements. And you just see this mound, not knowing that mound is as a result of a man-made construction. Even though the mountain itself wasn't the man-made construction, but it was as a result of the debris. If you excavate a place, right, and I'm telling any human being this because there are builders amongst us, and that's why the builders recognize this. If you excavate a spot and you dig the earth out and you throw it below you, it forms a shape of a mound. And mounds, my brothers and sisters, mountains. Get it? Mound. Mountains. Right? Mound. Did never one ever told you? Mountains. If you want to examine it geologically, check the structure of the solid nature of terra firma versus these so-called mountains. They are made of unattracted particles. The particles are not connected. Loose, fine, disassimilated, unharmonized particles. And a lot of these mountains, that's why they're so easy to be blasted away. That's why they're so easy to be removed. You understand me? They are not solid material as the original bedrock that they are hewn from. Next form of mountains. You have another form of mountain that is these abandoned, because after the floods, a lot of these temples that the Nephilims built, because they had them on all the elemental grids, right? So some was closer to, as time went on, and as I said, the waters came in and filled up these caverns, right, that were hewn out. After a while, they built different temples on the different energy grids. And so a lot of these temples survived, and a lot of the information within these temples facilitated a lot of the schools of mastery during more than one eon, more than one age. But what happened is, after each shift in the global, what they call the global, the cosmic, the weather patterns, the climate, some of these temples lost the magnetism of the energy that they represented, the energy grid. So let's just say those that were built on the freshwater lakes and the underground water cavern lakes, those, because Jamaica had a few of those. Tana, those built like that, right? When those places dry out, like the Sahara, right? Those temples and pyramids are no longer used. So sometimes during the time when it was still not arid, but neither a waterway anymore, they had these mounds that appeared like mountains. Later on, they appear like mounds of sand. And they're hollow. Why they're hollow? Because they were Nephilim temples. They were places of the induction of the energies, right? These were places that was functional within their society. And so, even though they have been out of use, even though they've been repurposed and reused by us, but because these regions over time became untenable to us because of the what we call the polar shifts, right? Which is a shift in polarity we're talking about now. Vibrational polarity, that every 26 to 29,000 years we have a polar shift. That means that the lands that are currently underwater were a lot of the lands that bear a lot of the monuments of the Nephilims and these previous civilizations, right? And as the plates move, the shift in the tectonic plates and the polar movements, when this current age go down into the reset, into the apocalypse, then the new age will be that their plane will rise back up from the depression it has gone through. And these are, again, our ancestors taught us these are the cycles within the flow of the energy, especially since the other energy came here and the other energy started doing something to disturb the harmony that had existed for eons upon eons. We cannot measure because we only started thinking about measuring after we came out of the all. You understand me? Life has always been. So we don't have no measure for it. You understand me? All measures came as an abstraction because we're no longer in the one. You understand me? So You might think days are I remember the days, I know the days, that's important. That shows that no. The days are only important because there's someone else there. Be by yourself long enough and see if you remember which days Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and Friday. Those are all abstractions, right? Because of the externalization of yourself. There's someone there to remind you it's Tuesday, you need to get this done, that done. But if it was you alone, by yourself, in the same so-called structures of Monday to Friday to Saturday to Sunday, we forget it all the time. It's so easy to forget that, right? That is not real. That is an abstraction of what is actually real. This if the infinite cycles, right? So a lot of these temples have been left. You know, triangular shapes are what people like to recount, but we had circular shapes. I just want to say that because I think the ancestors tired of people thinking that every ancient temple, how do, is like a triangle. No, they're circular ones. Every geometric shape you can think of. The flower, the seed, the apple, all of them. Patterns of life, Tambani. Trust me upon that. You understand? So a lot of these mountains, also in so-called island nations and so-called uncivilized places, are incredible pyramids, are incredible circular dome-like structures that have existed for millennia, that are currently under debris. There's lots of vegetation going up on top. There's lots of life going up on top. But because no one is doing the archaeological anthropology, no one wants to dig, because first you have to have an idea to dig, right? First you'd have to have an idea to dig, right? You'd have to have an idea of what you're digging to dig, right? So they're not going to just go digging in these places because it has to connect to the already established narrative. But a lot of these islands do have these incredible Paleolithic structures long before the so-called Precambrian and all these ages where they're said to be dinosaurs. You understand me? Because there's even ancient paintings of the people riding the stegosaurs. You understand? And that was I always had these dreams as a child. All of that was my dreams, right? And I saw the augmented reality too. Yeah, I was on the machines just like the Matrix tell you, on the ships. Yeah, so seeking around, astral projecting into the plane. I did all of that too. You understand me? You ever wonder why you think these things just pop up and people say, oh, it's just an idea? Do you know of anywhere else but this place? So I'm just going to say it as simple as I'm trying to say. When somebody comes up with this notion of science fiction and some great fantasy of, and some great parable of some unknown measure, do you think it came from somewhere else but within life? Is there anywhere else? So you say it is a fantasy, you say it is an illusion because of the spectrum you're on. How does electricity travel through the atmosphere and electrify your equipment that this image, sound, wave, balance, and frequency, an image can be before you in the manifestations that it is? What it is about this instrument that these things are possible? What about this isn't great alchemy? What about this isn't great metaphysics? You tell me. So in these simple things, when you were a child and you remembered yourself in the all, in all the dimension with the fanciful creatures that you only see in these TV movies, you ever wonder where they saw them too? Have you ever heard about Sinakofale? Have you heard about Sinakofale? Have you? Have you heard about Sinakofale? Then have you actually heard of Sinakofale? But maybe you've not heard of Sinakofale, but you certainly heard of Anubis, the dog-headed guardian of the underworld, from the Comitian and all those ancient allegories and archetypes. But there is Sinakofale, the animal, the dogman, Tangre. There are many things which pop up in fantasy, in the imaginative works of great orators. Have you ever wondered why metaphysics and imagination are so close entangled? You ever wondered? Remember what I said? You first have to have an idea to go searching. That's what you call a premise. And so they won't go searching until you have a premise. But the premise is not in any but the First Nations. It is DNA, cara. It is genetic memory. And yes, we know that you are of the synthesized archetype. I do remember that. And I do remember that the synthos, what they do is store information, especially with the help of the plasmodes, because they are giving them a lot of help to store and quantify and process this information. But remember I said before, that in the age of Aquarius, all of our apex storage devices with the information are slowly gonna become decoded. And the templates will alas awake again, and movies will be wrought again with the celestial story of the divine archetypes and source, manifesting in its true pattern to reset what's been unset by the offsetting otherness. This has been Jerome Sage Butler, right here, reasoning at the Tree of Life about the sacred archetypal mysteries of our origins of being. Origin, jin, ingenious, ingenious. This is the engine. The engine makes it work. The engine carries the power. The engine carries the power. The engine, origin, origin. Orisha, meaning the higher beings. Orisha, origin, Orisha jin, Orisha, original, Orisha, origin, engine. So the origin has become this engine of ingenuity, yeah. But all the genius amongst us are awaking blessings, love, and light.